Welcome back, everyone, to another fine episode of LabourList, having a chat about the madness that is our politics at the moment. Once again, we have had another fun, I was going to say week, but really it's been a weekend. We're only on Tuesday today.
I texted someone at 11 o'clock last night, so is it the weekend yet?
Yeah, and you're a long way off. But it has been another one of those historical moments that we at LabourList have had the privilege of essentially having front row seats for, and now being able to dissect that amongst each other and deliver that straight to you. So welcome. Thank you again for joining us if you've been present for some of our previous chats, and let's get started. So where are we right now as we deliver this podcast to you? We have a new Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, which also means we have a new Labour leader as well. Keir Starmer yesterday, I suppose late morning, not quite the afternoon, departed, said his final farewell outside the front of number 10 Downing Street, and just an hour later, Andy Burnham, following a conversation with the King where he accepted the responsibility of forming a new government for His Majesty, turned up, arrived and spoke to the nation, promising that he would give it his all as he takes on the role of Prime Minister. With me, as always, we have got your two favourite LabourList writers, favourite LabourList analysts, favourite Labour Party experts in senior reporter Daniel Green.
Good to be back.
Definitely my favourite.
And our editor, of course, you know her very well, it's Emma Burnell. So hello, both of you. I say hello as if we haven't been in constant communication for, well, realistically, the last few months, but especially this kind of hyper-intensive 72 or maybe it's more than that, 96 hours of which we've seen events develop. How are we both feeling today with a new Prime Minister, a new leader of the Labour Party? What is the general mood between yourselves and then across the Labour Party from your current read of it?
I think we've got hope in our hearts, haven't we?
Yeah, I think we're feeling optimistic. I think there is a lot to be positive about with this new government. Obviously, the circumstances aren't the best situation to be in, and I don't think any of us wanted to have a situation where we changed leader mid-government. I think we all wanted to avoid that, but we are where we are. And I think I think Burnham has come in with a bold vision. He's got a great team of ministers around him, and we'll talk about the cabinet later. And I think he's got a plan, and he said that he's ready. And I think we'll have to see how it comes out in the wash.
And Emma, we know very well with you as our editor that you have many connections right across the full spectrum of the Labour Party. How do you think members and members ranging right the way from people who go and door knock for a CLP all the way up to those who now might even be in that cabinet, how do you think the sort of general consensus of mood is right across the party at the moment?
I think overall people are pretty happy, pretty hopeful, feel reinvigorated, I think is the best way of saying it. I think there is a new energy to the party. There is, that comes with a double-edged sword. There is a bit of kind of trepidation. I think people do have a real sense that this has to work. And I think also, obviously, for some there are some hurt feelings, some disappointment that Keir Starmer didn't in the end make it work, or disappointment with those who decided that it wasn't working and made a move to ensure that something else would happen.
Mm-hmm. Now, we've obviously got a lot to get through today. So before we begin dissecting the cabinet and all the things that I know people are going to wait around because they do want to see what we think about that, I think we should very quickly just recognise the final days of the Starmer era. So I think it's fair to say, but please correct me if I'm wrong, that Starmer leaves on probably more positive terms than we saw throughout the majority of his premiership as Prime Minister of the UK, delivering the Hillsborough Law in his last few days, obviously quite a big moment, and a moment where I think the general feeling was that this was a bit of a passing of the baton between him and Andy, a policy that the pair of them have worked very closely on, that both feel really strongly about. Dan, could you just give us a quick sort of summary of what the kind of final period of the Starmer days felt like, across Parliament?
Well, it was, as you said about the Hillsborough law, I think that was his swan song in a way. I think that was his sort of way of, as you say, sort of passing the baton on to Andy Burnham, who's obviously been a campaigner on Hillsborough for many, many years. I think even, during his time in the last Labour government under Gordon Brown and Tony Blair, I think what Keir Starmer tried to do with that was just a sort of a final farewell. And I think he's tried to create a sort of a legacy, a positive legacy after sort of what's been a sort of a troubling sort of few months for him. And, it's been a difficult time for the party and obviously presumably for him on a personal level as well.
Yeah, and I think the Hillsborough law is quite emblematic, actually, of both the passing of the baton and a certain sense of continuity. That kind of very specific justice for the little people kind of sense is something that Keir Starmer, I think it's what brought him into politics. I think it's what he did in the law. I think it's what he did both as a defence barrister and someone who was a campaigning barrister, but then also kind of brought into his role at DPP. So I think it's a really fitting last act for him. And I think it was quite classily done that the credit was the majority Starmer, but with a nod to the fact that this has been something that has, I think, really shaped Andy Burnham as a politician. If you read Head North, the book he co-wrote with Steve Rotherham, it opens with Hillsborough. And incredibly moving chapters from both of them. It's a chapter they switch voices throughout. And the experience that Andy Burnham had as a minister in the Blair Brown government at the COP at the anniversary of Hillsborough, I think really has shaped everything that Andy Burnham has been since, and everything that he's done and cared about and re-examined in his politics since. So I think it both worked very well as a fitting final thing for Starmer to do, and as a springboard for the future of what Andy's government's going to look and feel like.
Now, that's a good opportunity to move into what we then saw on Friday, as Andy Burnham was brought in as Labour Party leader and had his acceptance speech, his first moment, demonstrating to the rest of the Labour Party specifically what he would do as leader of them. Now, Emma, you were in the room for this. What did you feel, as that speech was delivered? How do you feel about it?
I think it was a really good speech to set out a set of principles as to how he would run the party, and obviously that would also be translated into how he'd run the government. The room was really positive, hugely enthusiastic about everything that he was saying. The 5 principles that he set out about doing politics differently, I think spoke to a lot of the frustrations that people across the party have felt, not just under Starmer. I mean, this is not a Starmer thing, it's a Labour Party thing of old. And it remains to be seen how well he can deliver it, how well people will actually behave within these rules.
Let's come to that. So Andy delivered within his speech 5 principles, and I'm going to sort of just read each one to you and actually ask for both of your thoughts on how deliverable, as Emma says, these principles can be. So the first one is that one that you're talking about there. It's that one Labour team. And those are the words he used. He wants to restore one Labour team, ending internal warfare, removing the briefing culture. Now, I feel like lots of Labour leaders in the past have promised unity across a party that is known for its factionalism. Is there anything about the way that Burnham is talking about this, Dan, that feels genuinely different this time?
I think one thing that is genuinely different is just how much of the PLP came and united around him. And I think that's a testament to how everyone knows that this is Labour's last chance, that we really need to get this right. We can't keep swapping out leaders.
Well, as you say, they united around him as he was going into the leadership, but in the days since, and even on Friday, there's been lots of speculation around who Andy Burnham's Chancellor might be. Now, we now know who that is, and we'll come to him much later on. There was, lots of discussion around briefing wars between those on Camp Ed Miliband and those in Camp Shabana Mahmood. Is that, testament to what he said?
Well, of course, I think ending the briefing wars is easier said than done. And I think now that he's got his team around him, there can be some sort of command and control now to try and put some discipline in to try and stop this sort of thing from happening. How effective that will be remains to be seen. I'm sure, as you said, we're going to talk about the cabinet later, but we've already seen comments from certain Labour MPs, some names, some anonymously, around some of the decisions that were made around that, some of the cabinet appointments. And, that's going to be his first challenge, I think, in terms of making sure he can maintain order.
Emma, do you think factionalism can be taken out of this or not?
So there are two things that I think are worth saying. First of all, briefing is quite actually an amorphous term, isn't it? I analyse, she gossips, they brief. That's all the same thing. And nobody's like, some people definitely know they're briefing. Some people just think they're gossiping, but some of the kind of more official, like put an organisation's name to its statements from either side on the Ed Miliband versus Shabana Mahmood thing were very much modelling the opposite of what everyone's been calling for. I thought that the quite clearly choreographed image of the two of them walking up Downing Street together was a statement of intent. Now, on ending factionalism, look, the Labour Party only works because it's a broad church. So within that broad church, there will be people who will flock together with different ideas of what ideas the Labour Party should pursue, what their priorities should be, how we interpret our shared Labour values in different pragmatic and practical ways. That's inevitable, that's human. There will be factions. It's how those factions behave towards and with each other that matters, because there's a difference between there being factions and there being factionalism. And I think you cannot stop there being groups within the Labour Party, but you can say, OK, that's fine, but could you please spend more time on your shared values and your shared ideas than simply fighting over the 10% on which you disagree?
Yeah. Very good. Now, Andy Burnham also promised Principle 2. I'm going to try and speed run us through these. So I might ask less questions than I previously had planned, because there's so much for us to unpack here that maybe we should have taken more than an hour. But we will try and be as quick as possible. So he promised a new politics, where a lot of the intention there has been around moving on from political point scoring. Very quickly, Dan, do you think that's something that's possible within our kind of Western democracy culture?
Well, I think one thing that Burnham has talked about a lot is a sort of a more cross-party approach to government, and I think that's to be welcomed. I think especially on some of the big policies that he wants to pursue, particularly on social care, which has often been a sticking point for governments. I think through that can be the way that you achieve the political overcome the point scoring situation. But I think there will always be the back and forth between political parties. That's inescapable. It's just how you go about that. And then his third principle was much more around being distinctively Labour. He said he wouldn't try and out-green the Greens or out-reform. Emma, now you could do a whole hour on this alone.
I could.
But if you reckon you could summarise it in just a couple of sentences, what do we think being distinctively Labour actually means for Andy Burnham in government?
I think it means having a more class-based analysis. There is a very big difference between the kind of party that Labour wants to be sometimes and that Labour is. And I think there is we are the party essentially of public services, of a state that lifts you up, but also that has expectations on you. And I think that is what is distinctively Labour. I think there's a social contract between Labour and the state that doesn't really exist with the way that Reform or the Tories think about the state, which is just have as little of it as possible and drown it in a bathtub, or the Greens think about very much the state is only there to enable individual rights, and there is no real reciprocal relationship where we all have responsibilities too.
And do you feel that in the kind of opening, the opening moments of Andy Burnham's time as leader, that the promises that he's already started to make and the sounds that he is giving out to the public demonstrates that distinctive Labour that you've just described?
I think obviously his first move has been this kind of thing about VAT on energy bills, electricity bills in particular, I believe. I mean, it's funny because I've already had a letter saying, well, that's all very well, but actually what you've got to do is decouple the energy system from the gas. And I'm like, yes, but I don't think you can do that on day one. You can certainly set that out as an intention. Can't even say intention, never mind have any. But, you know, there's a difference between what you do on day one, what you do on day 30, what you do 6 months in, what you do after a year. And so if it's a direction of travel indicator, I think that's fine. I think that's kind of Andy for us.
Yeah.
It's a very Andy for us policy, isn't it?
And it's distinctive, I think I noted, between what we kind of got right from the very beginnings of the Starmer premiership, which was an immediate, I think you spoke about it in the last one of these that we did when we did this on the day Starmer resigned, and sort of noted the sort of doom and gloom speech.
Yeah.
I remember you pointed it out as one of his kind of immediate failings that actually kind of felt like it summarised the vast majority of his time in charge, was this sort of, everything's, you know, really difficult, we're not really going to be able to do anything. And then following that up with winter fuel, instead Andy's come in and talks about you know, his instructions and his principles that he's going to lead on, and then followed that with policy like that you've noted,
and I think
is a good indicator of direction.
On the steps of Downing Street, or in the street of Downing Street as he slightly wandered around, which
we'll come to that in a moment.
He said, you know, I'm going to end rough sleeping.
Yeah.
And what I immediately noticed was that everyone went on the media and went, well, he didn't even end rough sleeping in Manchester. You know, he only got it down to like about 20% of what it had been. And I'm like, he had a target and he got 80% of that target. And there is 80%, you know, I mean, I don't have the exact figures on me, so don't quote me on the figures.
Yeah.
But he, you know, an extraordinary amount of progress was made. And it is so classic of us to go, well, you didn't even manage to do that. And I'm like, you did 80% of that.
Yeah.
Like, I'd take that.
Well, we'll talk about that further in a moment. But I think the immediate rebuttal Andy would have as well is that he wasn't in charge of the government then. He was being given powers directly from them, which actually leads us to Principle 4. Nice little segue. Which is him talking about him being a leader of all places. Something else we'll touch on a little bit later, has been certain criticisms around this where the cabinet selection has been concerned. But Andy did, in his initial speech as Labour Party leader on Friday, make it very clear that he would be for the North, the South, the East, the West, Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales. He would be for all people, which also links to his fifth principle of delivering power to those places, taking power out of what he distinguishes as an overly centralised Whitehall and Westminster, where politics is concerned, and putting power straight into the heart of the places that people live. You know, and giving them more autonomy over the decisions they make. Is that something we think will be welcome across the entirety of the Labour Party?
I think it certainly should be.
I think it should be. I'm not sure it will be.
And why do you think it wouldn't be? What areas of the Labour Party specifically do you think might struggle with this?
Well, think about some of the culture issues that we have with the way that the party behaves. It's all about command and control, isn't it? If your model of discipline is command and control, then you want that in your government as well as in your party. And the thing about devolving power to lots of different places is that sometimes that means that other parties might be in charge. And, you know, we will have people going, but that
Shout out to Lincolnshire.
Well, quite. I'm literally about to say Lincolnshire. Yeah.
Or
say
Warwickshire County Council.
Or Teesside.
Yeah.
Ben Houchen, Lord Houchen, There are real issues around the ways that some of the decisions that have been made around the Teesside Development Corporation. Read any issue of Private Eye, or just listen to Private Eye podcast.
But listen to us first.
But only after listening to this, absolutely. But I think that's a culture change thing. We have to be relaxed about that. And the truth will also be true the other way around. If in, 20, 30 years, Labour leave government, having made these changes, we will be able to retain control over some areas and instill Labour values in some places in the country. And I think that's important. I think there's also going to be a bit of a clash sometimes with particularly Scotland, because actually when one of the mistakes I think New Labour made when they devolved power to Scotland and Wales is that because they weren't actually willing to give up that much from the UK government, they empowered, in Scotland in particular, what they did was take up powers from local government into Holyrood. And you ain't going to see the SNP letting go of those anytime soon.
Well, quite. Dan, final on Andy's Friday speech. If you were to predict what people would remember most from that in 2 years as Labour gears up for an election, and the things that Andy has to really stick by as these principles, what do you think the one kind of beating heart of the Burnham Labour leadership project will be?
I think beyond the words of it, it's just the hope.
Yeah.
To be honest, I think it was the hopeful vision for government that he set out in that speech, and I think that's something that we can't let go of. If we let sort of what happened with Keir Starmer and sort of saying, oh well, actually it's all a bit too tough, isn't it? If we let that sort of mindset creep back in, then we'll be consigned to opposition for 5, 10, 15 years once again. And so I think maintaining that sort of optimism and positive viewpoint and showing that government can actually deliver for people, well, that is the antidote for populism. It's the sort of our own brand of economic populism that we've already seen today as well, with the VAT being scrapped on electricity bills. I think that can be what helps us defeat Reform and the Greens. And
what helps to have people remember Andy's first speech as Labour leader.
Can I just make one further point just on the point scoring thing, which I think also speaks to what Dan just said. Look, Kemi Badenoch's already been clear that she has no intention of changing, right? I think that is an opportunity, not a threat. I think if Andy stands up every Wednesday in Parliament and just doesn't play Kemi's game, and doesn't model the, well, you said X, Y, and Z, but actually just answers the question, gives the hope to the country, gives an optimistic steer. I think as Reform are becoming more and more the pessimists when they used to be the ones who were kind of like a bit more for us in their presentation, not in their reality, obviously. I think that's a political space for Labour, and he shouldn't be battered by Kemi Badenoch trying to point score. I think he should just meet that with good cheer, because actually sometimes that's the most infuriating thing, when someone's trying to have a row with you and you just point blank refuse to do it.
Well, we shall see tomorrow. We're not back in Parliament, we're in recess, so unfortunately we won't be getting our Wednesday's Prime Minister's questions, but come September we will see it. However, for him to partake in that, he has to be the Prime Minister, which came about yesterday. Just 3 days after this first speech, we got another big one. His first speech as Prime Minister, as Emma pointed to earlier, he was without a lectern, without notes. Sorry, Andy, I am letting you down today, fella. I've got notes myself, but that is because I've got to keep this, it's got to be a tight run ship, as I'm sure you will do in government, probably without notes of your own. So, as you pointed out to before, the ending of rough sleeping, his first instruction as he turned and walked in those doors, what he said he would do. He would talk about that. I think governments often, perhaps, removing the last one, governments often start with big ambitions. Maybe that's harsh to say that we didn't start with big ambitions last time, but they weren't exactly joined up. However, this one in particular, how achievable do we think it really is? And if it isn't,
ending rough sleeping,
is that a problem for him?
So I used to volunteer every Christmas at Crisis at Christmas, and I volunteered in a very specific centre. It was purely accidental. It was the one that was nearest to me the first year I did it. But it was what was called a wet centre, which is where our guests were allowed to bring alcohol in with them because they wouldn't come off the streets if they weren't allowed to drink. And they were the hardest to reach section of the rough sleeping community. There were other crisis centres where there were people who had only been homeless for a few months, up to about a year. They were much easier to reach and much easier to house and home. There will always be a pocket of much, much harder to reach individuals. We got a few of them off the streets every year. And when you worked at the gate, shout out Gate Afternoon Crew, you would celebrate just singular wins because they were such wins. But also every year, lives were made a little bit better for the people that we did see year in, year out. The running joke was that at the start of the week, all the volunteers would come in bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. By the end of the week, we'd have worked 12, 14-hour shifts every day. Meanwhile, all the guests had had a decent night's sleep, a shower, fresh clothes, housing advice, narcotics advice, alcohol advice. And the balance between the way that we looked has shifted quite considerably. So the long and the short of it is you've got to set that ambition. Then you've got to be realistic about where you can hit within that. So when you go in to do an exam, for example, you want to get 100%, but you know that 80% will still get you an A+, right? Mm-hmm. We want to be an A+ government.
And intent matters as well, right? Yeah. And if the intent is, I want to get as many people off the streets, but I want to end rough sleeping, that's the intent, then that is a positive sign. Dan, my question to you, maybe a little bit of a difficult one. How quickly do you feel he has to show real progress, real tangible, noticeable, probably visible progress on this? How quickly do you think he has to do that to ensure momentum is sustained where the hope around it's concerned?
I think, and it goes with many other policy areas as well, I think he needs to show real tangible progress, at least a first start within the first 100 days, I think. I think there has to be some sort of element that there's actually action on that policy within that time frame. Otherwise, I think it will slip away by the wayside. And we're already seeing that in other areas, obviously with the cost of living measures that we'll talk about later, which show real sort of tangible, like, look, I care about this and I know what matters to you. I think that can obviously ending rough sleeping is going to be a huge challenge. It would be for any government to tackle, and whether we'll achieve it by the time of the next election remains to be seen. But to show that there's actual progress and that Burnham is taking that seriously, I think those first 100 days are going to be crucial in that.
Yeah, absolutely right. I've managed to keep us to time, which in a studio with me and Emma in is actually really quite impressive, I would say. But I have managed to keep us to time, which means we can now move on to, I'm sure, what the majority of people have been waiting for. It is the, classic sort of character aspect where politics is concerned, that as much as we can all put our noses up and go, oh, well, it shouldn't be about personalities and it shouldn't be about this person or that person.
As Tony Benn would say.
Absolutely. And it shouldn't be. And we can, spend some time on a different podcast talking about that. But the fact of the matter is, so many, political outlets, so many publications spend lots and lots and lots of time talking about this. And who would we be at LabourList if we didn't also provide some opinions and analyse what this actually means tangibly for government and where we're going. Now, first and foremost, I must plug something that we did on LabourList that Daniel Green, to the left of me, did an excellent job of running and has already started to deliver some wonderful reports that I'd very much encourage you to read as a result, which is our fantasy cabinet. We asked Labour members to put forward who they wanted to see in Andy Burnham's cabinet and give us a bit of a flavour as to who the most popular picks would be per job. So, team, fantasy cabinet, how right were the Labour members? Are there any kind of particular roles that we go, we saw this coming, we saw Labour members wanted this?
I'm going to show my age here, which is not even my age because it actually predates me, but it was repeated a lot through the 80s, is the Morecambe and Wise had this wonderful sketch with Eric Morecambe playing the piano and overseen by a then very famous conductor called Andre Previn, or Andre Preview as they called him. And he says, "You're playing it all wrong." He says, "No, I'm playing all the right notes, just in the wrong order." And I think in many ways that's how our fancy cabinet shook out, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a mixed bag. I think there were certain ones that we, our readers, credit to them, as were right on the money. I think Miata.
Miata's the best of the place my head goes to first.
But I think perhaps the big miss, and I think obviously I don't think it was just the readership that got this wrong. There was much of the sort of the political mainstream as well was Chancellor. I think.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone. I think that was a real.
I think I don't think it was kind of the third place dark horse, wasn't it? It wasn't completely out of left field.
There were a few.
I don't even know if he was third place. I think Wes was probably tipped before.
I think by the end, I think
there'd been rumblings.
Yeah, there'd been rumblings that Wes wasn't.
And there were the odd few. Credit to Mirror's Fleet Street Fox, who did suggest that it should be Healy quite about a week or so ago, and perhaps she's the only one out of the political punditry to get.
I think
that
Anne
right.
McEvoy was pushing it as well.
Okay, well, credit to her as well.
So it's all, the women got it right, except for me. But
Well, we will come on to John Healy's appointment as Chancellor very shortly. So I'm going to go for some quick fire ones from both of you, and to keep us to time, I need to be super snappy. So, biggest miss from the Labour members in their fancy cabinet? Where do you think they got it most on, besides Chancellor, which I appreciate was a surprise to all?
Oh gosh, besides Chancellor, it's hard to say. I think
I would
maybe health.
I was going to say I
think they wanted Wes back
in. It was just over 50%. Am I right, Dan? With that?
No, that's correct.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, see, I do read the reports. Just over 50%. I think 53% wanted wealth. We all want wealth. Wanted Wes back in health.
But we want him to be taxed.
Over 53% wanted Wes back in health, and they did not get that. We now have Yvette Cooper in health. Thoughts on that, both of you?
It's interesting because Wes did quite a lot of real kind of change stuff in his 2 years in the department. I think where Yvette is a very interesting and probably quite a good pick is that now needs to have a really sort of firm hand at the tiller to see that through. So you've kind of done the revolution phase in, scrapping NHS England. And now Yvette is, I think, probably exactly the right character to take the next phase, which is the more sort of solid delivery phase. And I don't think it's insulting to Yvette to say that that's exactly what she's got a reputation for.
That said, though, I think there will be some, particularly in the women parliamentary Labour Party, who will mourn the fact that there are fewer women sat in the great office of the state.
Yeah,
we will come to this. We will come to this. I have to keep them. I have to reel them in. I've got to reel them in. We will come to this because there are many things to discuss where this cabinet is concerned, and that is, of course, one that I have not omitted to write down. However, the last question for both of you, and I want one sentence on this just to keep us on time. What does this kind of data pool that we've got of the fancy cabinet picks tell us about where the membership is in relation to where Andy Burnham is?
I think the thing that particularly struck me about the fantasy cabinet is just how many cabinet ministers kept their jobs, and that was very much not the case yesterday when...
That's a great opportunity to segue, Daniel, so I'm going to take you up on it, actually, because you are referring to what the Times are calling the purge. The purge of the Starmer loyalists. Emma, what was your immediate reaction to that yesterday as it became very clear that 11, I think that's including Keir Starmer...
I think it might even be 12 now, actually.
Of over 10 at least, double figures, of Starmer's sort of loyal and most recognisable members of his cabinet were moved on out of positions. What was your immediate reaction to that?
I think I had a very mixed reaction, and I haven't yet settled in my head where I completely land on it. I think there is a real sense that if Andy Burnham is going to model this one Labour team thing, then a few more people who had remained very loyal to Starmer being in position would have done that. On the other hand, I also think that it is incumbent on Andy to build the team that he thinks is going to work as a team. And if he didn't see those people in there, that is his remit as Prime Minister.
Burnham promised a circuit break when he came
Yeah.
into government. I think Starmer's government was so unpopular by the end that people wanted to see change. And I think that is what he demonstrated, a real change from what has come before. That said, though, what he risks doing now is creating a cadre, a cabal of the
Yeah.
Well, this is the narrative that's emerging, is that, you know, on both sides, actually, of this situation, some are accusing Andy Burnham of being factional, getting into power and doing exactly what everyone goes, you know, when talking about, when I get into power, I will remove factionalism from the Labour Party.
And what I mean is
say,
it'll just be
"It'll
my faction."
that is the narrative emerging around this cabinet. Equally, on the other side, there is a narrative emerging that, as you say, Dan, there is like a Starmer loyalist faction that is now rife amongst the backbenches. And may start.
But you say it's rife amongst backbenches, 300 and something. Dan, you've probably got the exact figure in your head.
I think it was 369.
369 of them supported Andy, so that's not a very big percentage of the PLP
But you say
they can play with.
But this is the interesting part. Now, Dan, please, we were looking at this earlier, weren't we? There are two noticeable people who've been moved out of the previous Starmer project that have both also been very vocal in one more of a snipey attempt, the other a little bit more overt, in criticisms of Andy Burnham's government already.
They're already doing it.
But both of these former serving cabinet ministers nominated Andy Burnham. So even within that that big number that got behind him, there are people who perhaps the sour flavour to their grapes have taken precedent in the way they've responded to policies like the VAT announcement.
I think that's look, it is not nice to not get a job that you really want or to lose a job that you really enjoyed, and there is such a human element to that. I'm willing to give a fair amount of grace for a few days to people to have their moment and to be a bit cross. If they're still doing that in September, I think that's a problem.
I'm sorry. I think I have to disagree. I think, you know, the whole point of us being a Labour government is that we're a unified team. I think sniping from the sidelines, like, you know, Darren Jones and Steve Reed have done over the last 24 hours, does no one any favours.
I thought Darren Jones's was particularly odd because it was kind of telling on himself rather than anything else.
Exactly. And I think that, you know, that only works to undermine the Labour government that we should all be.
It's hardly.
I think both things can be true at once.
It's hardly country over party, though, is it?
Well, indeed. And I think, look,
it's hardly country over the self.
Either Andy Burnham is going to succeed. Like, I don't think there's going to be a roaring, like, nothing is ideal, right? So there'll be times, and we said this in our joint editorial, when we will criticise Andy Burnham. So we have to be aware that there, you know, come the times that we will be doing that. But if he is an overall success, if he's largely seen to have turned the party's fortunes around electorally, then those people sniping from the sidelines will get less and less cred. And if they continue to do it, they will look petty and small. At the moment, they are people who less than 24 hours ago lost a job they loved or didn't get a job they really wanted. And that is an emotional spasm that is recognisable to all of us because we've all been there, right?
But keep it privately, I think.
Yeah. Going public is a...
Keir Starmer has behaved with real grace and
I think
real
they should
class.
follow Keir Starmer's example.
Well, indeed. Maybe they should be loyal to the image of Starmerism and keep it private. Would I prefer that? Yes, of course I would. But I'm just trying to say that there is...
No, I appreciate the point.
There's a reason I called my business The Political Human that I ran before this.
I can actually let everyone in on this that me and Dan predicted this is exactly how the conversation would go. I said she'll defend them on a human basis. She'll then recognise the political human, and I appreciate that. But my
I'm not even selling my products anymore. This is not a plug.
The counterpoint I would have is that there is also sometimes, as a human, a need to just kind of go and have those conversations outside of the public eye, and then
I agree. And look,
smash up your office if you want, but don't do it in
about
front of everyone.
Occasion where I went for a position, thank God I didn't get it, because if I had, I probably wouldn't have applied to be editor of LabourList, and things would be horribly different in my life. But when somebody else got it, I was very sceptical that they were the right person for the job. But I had to continue to work under them. I came in with a certain amount of resistance. They were absolutely brilliant in the job. And in the end, I had to put my hands up and go, you know what? The right decision was made. And I'm hoping that that's where everyone can get to, because that's what's right for them as people. You feel better. But more importantly, far, far more importantly, it's what's right for the Labour Party.
And now we will move on to the one that I have reeled you back in from so many times, which is that whatever people do think of the reshuffle itself, one appointment in particular did dominate headlines last night, and that is the appointment of John Healey as Chancellor. So we will just go, happy with the appointment, Dan?
At first, I was questioning the logic behind it, but now that I've had a bit more time for it to percolate, I think it is a really solid.
What you're saying is you had an immediate emotional reaction.
Very good. But no, I think genuinely, I think it's a really solid choice. I think he was a safe pair of hands as Defence Secretary. He's obviously had Treasury experience under Tony Blair's government, and he's a happy medium between, you know, those who are really pushing for Ed Miliband and those who are really pushing for Shabana Mahmood. And in a way, it sort of has, you know, acted as a a deterrent to the political point scoring.
Yeah.
The briefing, it's like, okay, well, none of you are going to get it. I'm giving it to John Healey instead.
So I take all of that on board. However, Emma, what we heard yesterday evening, I think Patrick Maguire said this on Newsnight, was that amongst certain summer gatherings and get-togethers, as we are just right at the very tail end of that season now, there was discussions around people within Labour circles being particularly disappointed that the role of Chancellor has gone from a woman in Rachel Reeves and been given to a man in John Healey. Do you think that has created an avoidable problem for Andy Burnham, or do you think this shouldn't matter here?
God. So representation really matters. It really matters. I have spent my political life campaigning. You know, I am equal parts feminist and socialist, right? This is something I've spent my life talking about, thinking about, caring about. The problem comes when you move from representation to tokenism, and you cannot get into a position where once a woman has been appointed to a role, a man can never be appointed to that role again, because that is equally not the way that an equal society works.
I suppose it removes an aspect of meritocratic element to it as well. It almost like undercuts women who, you know, in a sense,
absolutely. And I want to see more women in the great offices of state. Mm-hmm. Now, having said that, and I was going to pick you up with this earlier, but you cut me off, so I'm going to have my say now. We talk about the great offices of state. We are the Labour Party, right? If you were going to say to people, what are the great offices? What are the great departments that matter? I think you might say health.
Yeah.
So, look, like the NHS is the Labour Party's religion. So I think actually the version of great office of state is in itself a very particular way of looking at politics that doesn't necessarily work either for the kind of things that the Labour Party is there to value, or frankly, that if you were going to have people saying, you know, they're quite kind of masculinized, I suppose, view of the world. So I think that, frankly, in any Labour government, the Department for Health is a great office of state.
Very good. So, and within that distinction, you would then have another.
You've got
woman.
A woman.
Moving on.
I think, can I also say, just on the gender parity thing?
Yeah.
Two of the most interesting appointments for me are not the ones where it's about a big department.
I know exactly who you're both about.
So there are two women that you saw over the shoulder of Andy Burnham throughout the Makerfield campaign, and that's Louise Hay and Annalise Midgley. And those two women have been put into really key roles, because those roles, one is Cabinet Office, which is where you do all of the tying everything together in government, making everything work as one strong narrative in government. and the other is the making sure that the PLP are working, which is the chief whip. And I think that those two, I think they work really well together as a team. And B, I think they work really well with Andy, and knowing that there's Andy's vision, there's their job to deliver it, and they are the strong women. And I think having women in both of those roles actually will be quite important for that cultural change stuff that we've been talking about.
I think I would be very much inclined to agree. I'm quite interested to see, particularly with Annalise Midgley's role, Andy has in the past been critical of the whip system in its previous form. So I think her role in particular is even more heightened in an Andy Burnham government in the way that we will see
we're going to have to see a
developmental
much
changes.
more imaginative way of doing it.
Yeah, as to how it will work. And, who better to put in that role than someone who he clearly trusts very, very much. We'll move on to the next, I think, sort of like big, I say shock appointment, but this had started to leak out into the press a little bit earlier. But Wes Streeting Defence Secretary, thoughts?
I saw some mixed reactions to that, I have to admit. But I think, in the same way that he did a really solid job as Health Secretary and, making the NHS fit for the 21st century, I'm hopeful that he can bring that same attitude to defence. The defence of the modern day looks very different to what it did at the end of the Cold War, and with drone technology and many more technologies along the way. Hopefully, he can bring some of that modernisation to the MOD as well. And of course, from a broader point, he's one of perhaps Labour's best communicators as well. He dominated the broadcast round under Starmer's government, even though he left about a couple of months before the end. And so it's good to see him back in a really solid cabinet position.
And I think, building on Dan's point, I think there are going to be two aspects of his role in defence. One, and he's kind of done this with the whole NHS England thing before, so he's got the kind of experience of meddling with the machinery and kind of trying to make that work better. Because one of the big criticisms of the Defence Department is that they spend money like water on things that don't work. And because it's defence, you don't get criticised from that by the Daily Telegraph or the Daily Mail or the Times or whatever. But actually, defence money being spent well probably matters more than anything else. So having his experience of that, I think there is an element where Wes is quite interested in new ways of doing things, new technologies. That then will probably creep into some criticisms around companies like Palantir, which obviously kind of one of the big criticisms of having them involved in NHS data was that they also had a lot of defence contracts, particularly with some regimes we may be less keen on than others.
And very quickly, we are starting to run out of time, and I've got some more quick-fire questions to ask you before we summarise with our final thoughts. But it would be wrong not to also look at two other appointments I've picked out. One, so Dan, I'm going to start with you. Lucy Powell in education, Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, was removed from the cabinet by Keir Starmer, taken away from her role as Leader of the House of Commons, and now is back in a really big role. I've seen Bridget Phillipson lose that responsibility as well. Do we think education, again, given what Andy's been saying, is going to be quite a big part of this project with another key ally in its place? Yeah,
no, absolutely. I think education is going to be front and centre of this new government. Obviously, Burnham has talked a lot about skills. He's talked a lot about technical education as well, going beyond just the university route. And I think that's going to be, I think it's really important to have someone from the north of England representing that role. Obviously, we did in Bridget Phillipson, and she's, passed the baton on after doing a really good job at education.
And remains in cabinet as well, Bridget, as Women's Inequalities.
She certainly does. And I think the one thing that will be interesting to see from Lucy Powell there is obviously she ran as Deputy Leader of the party on the platform that she'll be able to fully focus on that role as Deputy Leader and be fully in touch with the membership. And now that she's got quite a substantial cabinet, a substantial cabinet position, and remains to be seen how.
Well, and also what will be very interesting is that if the devolution agenda works that will actually move quite a lot of things out of that department, because the skills, an awful lot of what's talked about in devolution is actually devolving power over skills to regional combined authorities, regional mayors, etc.
Yeah.
So
how she works within that.
How she works within that. Can Labour do some quick wins on sorting out student finance, student debt, which has obviously been a hugely contentious issue, but also moving away from our slight obsession with thinking about education almost predominantly in the tertiary rather than in the primary and secondary.
Now, I'm going to literally need like a single sentence from you on this because we're cutting in quite fine. But Ed Miliband, Emma, in Foreign Secretary, do we think that was the right appointment for Ed, or do we think it was an appeasing one?
So I think Ed clearly wanted to be Chancellor. He is a man that is fizzing with ideas. I'm listening at the moment to him reading his book, Go Big. What I think is underrated in this is that Ed has a massive reputation on the international stage from having negotiated really hard on some of our climate change deals. So I think he's going to play that role really well.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Right, now, quick fire questions for you on this before we end this lovely hour that we have spent together again. Dan, biggest winner. Who's the biggest winner in this cabinet appointment?
John Healey, I think. He's come out, I think obviously left government on principle, and he's come back and, the second most important job in government.
Biggest surprise we know is John Healey, but biggest surprise other than John Healey, Emma?
Oh God, other than John, I think possibly Lisa Nandy staying at culture. I thought she might go into something more kind of regional development-y kind of brief because of her love of towns and buses.
Biggest omission, Dan? Actually, biggest omission to both of you. Who do you think was pretty, priced in as going to be part of the cabinet that now is not?
I think Nick Thomas-Symonds was quite
that was a surprise to me.
Sort of lost his job. Obviously, a lot of work was being done on the sort of the renegotiating our relationship with the European Union. So for him to go is quite a surprise.
Yeah.
Then we will go solely for names here. I don't want any more nuance. One appointment likely to define this government.
Go on, I'll let you go first.
Lou Hay.
I want to say something to be different. Oh, God. I think, no, Lucy Powell, I'll say, for education.
I like it. I like it a lot. I think these are good answers.
Say those are both women.
And potentially the hardest question.
Oh, God.
Again, one name, no nuance, no added detail. Which Secretary of State will find the first 6 months hardest?
Oh, that's a really difficult one.
Miata.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. As a 2024 intake MP, I'd say Miata as well.
Not that I think she'll fail, but I think that given that there is going to be some nuancing around her role,
tough brief, and it's got a lot of there's a lot of complicated connotations where net zero is concerned. As much, not that I wish to admit that the right wing have made any sort of grounds in drumming up some fury around that, but it is more complex than we'd like. Right. That is me bringing a stop to
end all nuance
of the waffle. Now, we love nuance at LabourList, and as I say, we probably should have booked a whole other hour for this one, but we try and keep it nice and tightly packaged for you. As always, when I finish one of these, the first thing that I must do is thank all of our friends at LabourList who make us being able to do this possible. It does cost us money, and as an independent Labour journalism, publication, that's not always the easiest thing to find. So thank you very much to our friends who do support us and do want us to succeed here. I want to also thank Dan and Emma for joining me today. It has been, as you can imagine, I'm sure, quite an intense period for us at LabourList as the Labour Party continues to
keep us busy.
Keep us very, very busy. But we are still here. Even if my voice is a little bit run down, we are alive and thriving, as we always wish to be. If you do like any of this content, then please do subscribe to our newsletter for more. You'll hear from each of us one morning. Oh, well, both of these guys, you'll hear from them twice a week on weekday mornings, and you'll hear from me once as well.
And I believe if you click below, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel.
You can indeed. And you can also, in our description, you will find a link to subscribe to our newsletter where you will get the analysis of the biggest Labour stories of the day and also direction to our website where you'll be able to find lots of opinion pieces and thoughts and feelings about all things Labour from right across the Labour community. So, please do get involved. Drop us a like, drop us a follow. And, given the Labour Party continues to keep us busy, I am very sure that we will see you quite soon. Thank you so much for watching and see you next time. Goodbye.